Now you might be a little bit puzzled about the name of my particular presentation, Staring at the Blank Page. Now basically what that is meant to mean is to remind you of the difficulty of converting research into an engaging, interesting book. And I think every genealogical congress that I've been at so far, or seminar, the emphasis is always on research. Different types of research, different archives, how to do research here, there, and everywhere. And there's very, very little about what to do with all the information that you collect. And what I want to do today is to just make a few suggestions. Now, first of all, I have a look at why people in the past created family trees. Now, certainly none of the families that I'm acquainted with ever created or even thought of creating the family tree. Now, first of all, there was no necessity for it, and secondly, they were all farmers or working in various occupations that took a lot of their time, and they didn't have the time or the energy or the money or the education to do it. So there are very few templates to go on. Now, when I started doing the family tree, I kind of wrote up different versions of different families and wasn't quite happy with any of them. And the plan that I've come up with at the moment, I'm happy with. So I'd just like to kind of present that and see whether it would suit other people who are doing a family tree and are just a bit confused about the process. Now, there were 4 reasons, as far as I can ascertain, why people in the past made family trees. Now, they're not in any special order, they're not in chronological order or anything like this. Now, one was a family tree was your credentials for advancement. Now, there is such a thing in European society as the nobility, or people basically who are wealthier than the rest of them and formed a clique in most countries by the ownership of land and the involvement and the kind of, I suppose, control of political power. And then they got notions about themselves and thought that they were kind of a special species. And they described themselves as a nobility. Now, a good example would have been the ascendancy class in Ireland, who by conquest basically managed to take over most of the land in Ireland that had belonged to the clans or to individual Irish people. Now, they were the kind of nobility. They had their family trees and they had their coats of arms, and it kind of enhanced their kind of opinion of themselves, if nothing else. So, if you were a member of the nobility and you were, we'll say, going abroad, you certainly needed your family tree if you were emigrating. Now, there was an Irish nobility as well, before they were, I suppose, wiped out by the various British campaigns between, the coming of the Normans, and then you had the, we'll say, the Tudors conquering Ireland, and then you had the Williamites, or say the Cromwellians and the Williamites, and so on. And the Irish nobility had to go abroad. We say after the siege of Limerick, thousands of them went abroad, and so a lot of these were highly educated people, highly competent people who were in the army and so on. Now, they all either brought with them or sent for the information about them in the genealogical office, or what would you call this, the Office of Arms, or the Ulster's office in Dublin. When they went abroad, they went to Austria, France, Spain, even Russia, and you had your credentials, and they established that you were a member of this nobility, which was European-wide, and you managed to progress in the army or the civil service or whatever as a result of that. Now, this is an example of what the nobility would like to have. Now, this is called the Sées Quartier, or the 16 coats of arms. Now, that was as good as it could possibly get. You see at the bottom, there's one individual and his coat of arms. Two above that, 4, 8, 16. Now, that showed that his 16 great-grandparents were members of the nobility. So that was an impeccable credential for advancement. And a lot of the kings and princes in Europe would have been very interested in genealogy and heraldry. So it was obviously a huge advantage to have a family tree. If you couldn't say anything about your descent, you were basically a peasant. And you had no, what would you say, you had no standing in society in many countries. Now, that was one reason. And the Sées Quartier was a French way of doing it. You'd have your 16 coat of arms. Most people couldn't, obviously, reach that kind of perfection, but some of them could. And they produced that. And basically, it was their passport to success. We'll have to go back in a minute. Now, the second reason for having a family tree is this business about inheritance. Now, inheritance was by what was called primogeniture. Primogeniture basically means that the eldest son gets the estate and the titles and whatever value is going. And that was the law since the Normans came to England. There was primogeniture, eldest son gets all, and it goes from eldest son to eldest son to eldest son. Now, if the eldest son is dead before the father, it doesn't go to the next son. It goes to the son, the original man's grandson, if there was one there. Now, if there wasn't, it goes to the next son and the next son. Now, very often there wouldn't be an heir. There might have been generations when you had a person of property who died, and it would be all daughters. Now, that would create a big problem. Now, they might go back to his father or his grandfather and trace those male people in the various families. And if they came across one, he got everything. Now, he might be a fourth cousin, but he was in the direct male line, so he got everything. So it was certainly hugely in your interests, even if you were getting nothing, to keep your family tree going. It was like having a lottery ticket, that your luck might come up and you inherit the estate. So that was another reason. And let's go back to the royal family again. Now, in fact, if you look at the family there, there's only one person who'd never be the monarch of England, and that's the lady on the right. Now, you see, Prince William is next in line because he's the eldest son. After him comes his son. I'm not too well up in the names of the royal family, but that's the tallest of the children. He's next. Now, strangely enough, the girl, his daughter, comes after him, because primogeniture has been set aside for the royal family. And after the little girl comes Yeah, well, Louis, whatever his name is. Okay, he comes next. And if all of those aren't around, the next one is despair. I'm sure he causes a lot of despair to his family. He's next, because he's the next in line, the most closely related person to the monarch. And that's the way it would go. That's if Prince William is the king. Okay, so obviously the family tree was of huge importance there as well. Now, the next reason for a family tree would be the rules of marriage. Now, the rules of marriage, in accordance with the state and in accordance with the church, have changed over the years. And they were always expressed in so many degrees of relationship. Now, what you have to do to the husband, or the potential husband and potential wife, is you count, we'll say, working out for the husband, you count the husband, and you count anybody between him and the nearest common relative of the two of them. So if it was a grandfather, you would count, okay, the father, and you don't count the actual ancestor there, but you go down the woman's line then, and you count, we'll say, count back down, so her father, and what you get is they're 4 degrees away from their most recent common ancestor, or their first cousins. Now, 4 degrees away, up to very recent times, meant that marriage was forbidden. You couldn't marry your first cousin. Or, and if you go back to earlier times, you couldn't marry your second, your third, your fourth, or your fifth cousin, which was making it extremely difficult for people to get married. Now, the reason for that, apparently, this came in about the 12th century. The reason for that was, in a lot of Europe, the population was small, and people in the various towns and villages had all become well intermarried. Everybody was related to everybody else. Now, because that has an impact on the gene pool, the church and the state really wanted them to go further afield for their partner. So you made it so that somebody was so closely related to the people in the village that they had to go to the next village. Now, that changed over the years, and it was imposed right throughout Western Europe. So that was important. So that's just the image for that particular piece of information. Now, there were ways of calculating your closeness in affinity, or your closeness in blood relation to somebody else. So this was, no, as I said, this applies to civil as well as religious law. So in this particular table, what you do, and this is the State of Nevada Commission on Ethics, what you do is you put your own name into, you see the column on the left, the top box has nothing in it. You put your own name there, and all of the people that you see, all those relations that you see in red, you're not allowed to marry those. Now, if you were talking about, we say the 9th and 10th century, you couldn't marry anybody on that list. Okay, you'd have to go beyond that. So even a descendant of your great-great-grandparents, if you were descended from the same set of great-great-grandparents, marriage was forbidden. So, okay, that was a good reason enough to have a family tree, because you weren't relying on memory or asking the oldest person in the place you, I'll just keep slipping down. You weren't asking anybody else, you had a record of it, somebody memorized it or whatever. Now, I won't spend much time on this, but if you were living in Ireland at that time, there was a different family structure and a different way of calculating things. Now, the Irish family, up to probably the 16th century, had various levels in it. Now, if you look at the right-hand side, you'll see what the list of things on the left-hand side actually means. Now, your normal family, which would consist of, we'd say, a grandfather, a son and a grandson, or a grandfather, a number of sons and a number of grandsons, that in the old Gaelic system was called the Geal Finna, and it was a particular social group. The next group up would be the descendants of the next level up, well, it's really great grandfather. So it descended from him. In other words, there were rings of relationship. You had a free man, his sons, his grandsons, then the father of the free man, the grandfather of the free man, and the great grandfather of the free man. And that was a social group. And because the group owned land, and if we say a family disappeared because there were no more members, you'd have to know what Derek Finna and In Finna and so on that you were in to get your inheritance. So in Irish society, it was very important to have an idea of your ancestors if they possessed tribal land. Now, the question then you have to ask yourself is, okay, it's not to do with marriage or nobility or inheritance, either in the European system or the Irish system. None of those reasons are in your minds when you're thinking of writing a family tree. And there is absolutely no point in following the methods that they used to create the old family trees. One was for marriage, one was for inheritance, and there were two kind of inheritance systems, and one is to have proof of nobility. None of those things. So basically what that means is you can write your family tree whatever way you like. There's no right way of doing it. That was the way they did it in the past for very specific reasons. Those reasons no longer exist. Okay. These are some of the reasons that came to my mind when I thought of doing my family tree. In the hope of finding a glorious past, castles, coats of arms, wealth, famous ancestors. Okay? And I'm sure everybody thought of that from time to time. Now, I found a very dull list of tenant farmers with an odd, interesting story. And none of the others actually materialized, to my great disappointment. Now, another fallback reason that you might have, failing the first, is an interest in history. And it is actually having a family tree brings history more to life. Now, I can name several of my ancestors who were alive during the famine. I know when my ancestors stopped speaking Irish and started speaking English. And you have this movement, this very unusual phenomenon in Ireland, where one generation was speaking Irish, as they had for probably 1,500 years, and the next generation was speaking English. And it's very interesting to kind of look into that and see where that change occurred. Now, my grandfather, or my great-grandfather, is down in the 1901 census as able to speak Irish. None of his children could speak Irish. And that is most unusual. Now, if a family, we'll say, emigrates from Germany to America, it takes 3 generations for that to happen. The original immigrants, the parents would speak German and a bit of English. Their children would speak fluent German from speaking to the parents, and fluent English from school and friends. And the next generation would just maybe have a smattering of this. But you had a situation where, now in my Beara ancestors, it would be kind of fairly rapid. There'd be, this generation would speak English, the next, or the previous one would have spoken Irish. Anyway, you kind of know the name of somebody who lived at that time. Now, the old kind of sarcasm before was that, the Germans murdered 6 million Jews, and somebody would say, well, name one. So the thing is, 1 million Irish people were kind of died in the famine. Well, I can't name one in my actual family tree, but I know the people who were alive at that particular period. Now, the other thing is, it's important to commemorate your ancestors. That, and in another sense, it's shameful not to know anything about the people from whom we owe, or to whom we owe our existence. So there's a kind of moral pressure to try and, commemorate these people. Now, any groups that I've given lectures to who, weren't involved in genealogy, I'd usually ask them to put up your hand if you know the names of your grandparents, and all the hands go up. Now, put up your hand if you know the names of your great-grandparents. And, this is not your normal group. There might be a hand in the corner there will go up. Now, the point about it is, you think about that a generation on. Now, it's disappointing that we'll say your children don't know the name of your grandparents. But it's even more disappointing that your great-grandchildren won't even know your name. That's the way it goes. So there are the considerations. Now, you start off with great hopes that your family were nobles. And then you have to kind of think about it in a more rational way. Why would you trace your family tree? And there would be some of the reasons. So the next thing then is, how would you actually go about this task? We had Jim. Now, okay, your family tree, we all agree the family tree is important because you're all here. You're not here for the tea and the coffee. So, why isn't it done? And we're going to how to do that. Now, some people don't know what the process is of doing it. It's just too hard to actually do a family tree, and I appreciate that. You can't decide on the format. What format will you use? You could have it in various ways. You could have it as an electronic one, on family tree, maker, ancestry, and so on. Then I think the main reason why people don't write their family tree is because they want to do perpetual research. You want to be sitting there in front of your computer forever. And you don't want to feel bad about it, so you pretend you're doing important work. And when you're doing something you enjoy, it's very easy to cod yourself. So you're basically sitting in front of a computer, having a pleasant evening, enjoying yourself, engaging with all sorts of things, and at the end of the day, you've nothing to show for it. You may as well have been watching Coronation Street. So perpetual research is a type of laziness, and it's a type of addiction. You should be joining Genealogists Anonymous to get out of it. And like to sum it up, basically, researching a family tree is enjoyable. Writing a family tree is painful. And who inflicts pain on themselves? Now, okay, we get on to the business then of what you should kind of be doing. Now, the format and the content of family history is entirely a matter of personal choice. Now, in other words, I'm not telling you the right way to do it. I'm telling you I did it a lot of wrong ways, and I haven't discovered that this is the wrong way yet. So I'm passing it on. Now, I think the first thing to do is to name as many ancestors as you possibly can. List the names of as many ancestors as you possibly can. Now, that's the rational way. Without a single one of those, you wouldn't be here. Okay, you have 64 great-great-great-great-grandparents, and all of them were essential to your existence now. So, like, they are all equal. In the past, they weren't all equal. In the past, you trace your father's line, and it might end up in a bonanza. You trace your father's line, and we'll say some of the early ancestors, and you won't end up with what the church will regard as an incestuous marriage, and so on. But now you're free to do whatever you like. So, like, there's no difference between your ancestors. They're all the same. And you should give them all equal attention insofar as you can. And that allows you to have a lot of research options. If you stick to one family, like we'll say your father's ancestors, because you know you're used to that surname and you think it's more important than the others. If you do that, you might find that his doesn't go back very far, but your great grandmother's genealogy on a different line goes back a long way. So you've a lot more chances. So okay, that would be it. You name as many ancestors as you can. The second thing, you'll see what I mean by this a bit more as we go on, that a family is the building block of the family tree. Now, I think it's a mistake to write a document that has more than one family, that it spills over into a few additional generations. Because if you think of your own family, it has very little to do with the families that came before, unless it's a kind of a family that lives in the same house for generations. Now, for instance, my Kerry ancestors, there are 6 generations in the same house. And by looking at that, you might think that there is some kind of continuation there, and that applies to all families. Now, it doesn't have continuation. What it has is it totally obliterates the female family. That's so totally forgotten about that you don't even think of it as part of your ancestry. Now, if we'll say your 2 ancestors, father and mother, come from 2 different households, and they start their family life somewhere else, like we'll say they move from the country, 2 different locations in the country, and they move into the city. It's much easier to see that that is a unique social unit, absolutely on its own. And the father takes certain traditions with him, the mother takes certain traditions of the family with them, and the children kind of absorb the 2 of those. And usually there's a bit of tension between, sometimes it's maybe just humorous, and sometimes it's more serious, that there's my side and your side. he didn't get that from my side, you know. Very saucy, he didn't get that from my side. We were very compliant. What I'd say, there are several reasons for this. Every family is its own building block, and you have to have it on its own as a unique kind of thing. It's very important as well to decide who is the family history for, because there are a whole lot of diplomatic things that have to be taken into account as well. What to include, what to exclude, and so on. And then what format will it take? And will it allow cheap reproduction? Now, if you're going to give your family tree out to a lot of people, that, in a sense, determines what kind of format you're going to have. You don't want to have to print out, 40, 100-page book so many times and post it on and so on. So you have to keep that in mind. And another very important thing is, how long will this be accessible for? Now, I used to think that a CD-ROM was a good storage space for a family tree. Now, my CD-ROMs are actually hanging out in my back garden to frighten the birds, which they're very good at if you're planting grass. And they're gone. Now, if you think back when computers came in first, you had the Apple computer with their 4-inch discs. Now, if you wanted to open up something on a 4-inch disc, you'd have to go to a museum to do it. And that sort of technology is accelerating all the time. So we'll come back to that. But as far as I can see, the only safe resource or storage for a family tree is to print it out and get some stuff from Christine over here to put it into, and it will last. It will last for a long time then. So that is important. I mean, the Book of Kells is about 1,000 years old, but not 1,000. It's about 700 years old, and that's still there, and it's still legible, and so on. So now, just to go into those a little bit more. You don't have to have any skills to write a family tree, except to be able to read and write. And some of the best that I've seen are scrapbook type family tree. Now, all you have to do is be able to write legibly, be able to cut and paste. It can accommodate anything a family tree requires, family history requires. And the other thing that's very important is you can convert that without any difficulty into a PDF document. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with PDF documents. Now, PDF stands for Portable Document Format, and it's on everybody's computer. You can do out your family tree, and we say in a scrapbook, get somebody to scan it for you. Just scan the thing, and you can use the scans to make it a PDF, or get somebody to do that for you, and then you can send it out anywhere for free. Now, recently I finished a family tree of a specific family, and I sent it out to the people who were interested. I could email it, and as well as that, I have it on my iPhone there. The whole family tree is there, and it's on WhatsApp. And a lot of people find out fantastic that you can have it on your phone, and they can send it. People they can send it to anybody they like for free. And then, if the recipients want to print it out, they just download it and print it, and so on. So I would say PDF is probably, at the moment, the way to distribute a family tree, instead of getting it printed out and stapled together and so on. All that is very time consuming. Most people have a computer or a smartphone And everybody has access, if they want to that WhatsApp messaging program. And you can have it there, and you can come along to one of these things and just take it out. Oh, this is my family tree here. Make it a bit bigger, have a look at it, and so on. And that will keep charts, and it will keep whatever else you want there. And you can have as many families as you want on it. Now, the second thing is you could do it in Microsoft Word. That's the easiest application and the most widespread application on a computer. It's the most used format, probably, for documents. And you have full control over the design. You design it yourself, which is easy enough. And you can easily import pictures and bring in whatever kind of imagery you want, and then you can convert that into a PDF, and there it is. Now, you can do them online. Now, I know a lot of people are on Ancestry or MyHeritage, and you can make huge trees there. Now, I'm in Ancestry myself. I don't know why, because I don't get any value out of it. But on Ancestry, you have people with 30,000 people in their family tree, which is totally banned. It makes no sense. At the level that they indicate, what would you say, matches, they go as far as 6 to 8 cousins. Now, at that level, they are just members of the general population. And if everybody was joined Ancestry, everybody would be your match. And there's no question about that. Now, it's very easy to see how ridiculous this is. Now, if you have a first cousin, you share 2 of 4 grandparents with them. So that's a close relation. Now, if you have a sibling, you share 2 of 2 parents. Grandparents, 4 of first cousin would share 2 of 4. Now, if they're second, they share. It's always 2, but it goes up. So you have first cousins 4, second 8, third 16, fourth 32. 5th, 64, 7th, 128, and 8th, 256. So with an 8 cousin, you have 2 of 256 great-great-grandparents in common. So, those family trees are lunacy. And I remember some genealogist that was kind of witty. He said, look, what is happening here is people join Ancestry. They put up all of their genealogical information. Matches are made by other people. And you were paying for this. Now, he said, it's like stocking Tesco's shelves and then going in and doing the shopping there and paying for what you put in, which kind of made sense to me. Okay. Now, just go in a bit more to the points I was making. Who is your family tree for? It could be for your own family, it could be for your first cousins, it could be for other relations. You must take people's sensibilities into account. Now, you don't write a family tree and put in all sorts of stories that reflect badly on people. Now, it's all very well to say, that your ancestor was a pirate. Now, that goes way back, and there's a kind of romantic feeling attached to a pirate. No, but basically a pirate is a criminal. And, if at the time somebody was related to a pirate, it didn't reflect well on them. So you have to consider what people will think of more recent ancestors if you shock them for being involved in something that generally would be regarded as, a bit kind of unpleasant. Now, to avoid that, I think a great idea is involve, particularly in recent ancestors, involve your first cousins in it. Now, recently I was doing a family tree of my grandfather, and I was dealing, when I'm doing a family tree, I always do the parents and the children, and then a description, short description of the children. And now, what I would be doing there is giving a description of the parents of my first cousins. So I thought it would be prudent then to actually get onto them and send them a draft of the family tree, so that it wouldn't be offensive to them, or maybe it was after making a mistake or something like that. So I just got onto them, and I'm sure it's the same with everyone. There they had their family tree more or less finished. All they had to do was approve it, but they went further and they wrote bits themselves. So instead of me writing something about my uncles and aunts, they volunteered to do it themselves. They knew the people better, and that kind of went into it then. Now, if we have time later on, I'll show you some of that stuff. Now, to name as many of your ancestors as you can. Now, I'll show you a chart that facilitates that. It's a circular chart with room for all of your ancestors over the generations. And there's a numbering system. I'm sure people might have heard of that on Entefal system, where every ancestor has a number. And that number can be used as an indexing number as well. So there's no ancestor with the same number. And you can tell simply by looking at the number what ancestor you're talking about. In this particular system, all the odd numbers, all the even numbers are men, and unfortunately all the odd numbers are today. It's obvious to the men made that out. No. So the content then, I would say, is, okay, you think it out, the tone and so on. Then next, you spread the list of ancestors, try and get as many ancestors as you can. And then you write about individual families. But you write about them as separate units. Now, just point there, relatives from your father's side have no interest in your mother's side, and vice versa. But when I was making out my grandfather's family tree, now only half my cousins were interested in it. In other words, my grandfather's sons and daughters. My grandmother's or my grandfather's sons and daughters from the other side would have no interest in this. So there's no point in mixing them up and putting them in the same thing, because you're just, annoying people. They get it mixed up and they don't know what it's about and they have no interest in it. So you do the families separately and you don't have that problem. And you can send, you have one big book with all your ancestry in it, which only applies to you. Doesn't apply to anybody else except you and your brothers and sisters. But if you have separate families, totally separate from one another, you can send them out to the people that they are descended from, their ancestors. Now this is a different take on the family tree. Now on the left you see that's a tree, okay? It's a family tree, it's always often used as that. Now on the right you have a tree that's after being sawed down, and you just see a cross section of it and the rings, one ring for every year. No, but that's the type of shape that I would favour. Now this is your circular chart, and in the middle there, there's a clearer one of these coming up, but in the middle is the subject of the family tree. Now you see there are two sections in the next circle. One for the mother of that person and another for the father. And as you go out, it doubles. There's 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And now this is a very simple graphic, but you instantly know what it is about. Now it's a blank one on the right. But this is a better version of it now. This is a cousin of mine in America. And she sent me the stuff, and I did that out for her. But she had almost a whole lot filled in. So her name is in the middle there, Welsh. And then you have Edward Walsh. Now he was of Irish descent, and you know the descent kind of changed as they spent more time in England, and you have all different nationalities there. But you see, the upper half is always the father's. Typically, you know, it's a male-dominated business. And the lower half is always the mother's side. And if you take the upper half, you see on the right-hand side, that's the family tree of the maternal grandmother. And on the left-hand side, you have the paternal tree of the grandfather, and so on. So, you know, you have the bullseye is the subject. The next section, the parents. The next section, the 4 grandparents. The next section, the 8 great grandparents. And it kind of goes on like that. So instantly, you see who's connected to who. Now, I can't remember any of this, but as soon as I take that out, I know exactly who is who, because, you know, they're just one on top of the other. Now, it's a simple, nice-looking graphic, and you can see how successful you've been by just looking at it, how many blanks are there. Now, you can get this particular diagram with the outer ring omitted, and it probably might be inclined to give you a bit more satisfaction. There's not the same emphasis on blank spaces. But on the other hand, you know, if you do have it overflowing into generation 7, there are 7 generations there, it's as well to have a place to put it. So I'm saying that's the first part of your family tree. And that's a part that you can do, and you can send out to people. Now, I sent out that family tree. A family tree of my children, quite like that, to my first cousin. But I had to remove 3/4 of it, that he would be only interested in a particular section. So I sent him out the section dealing with our common grandparents. Now, this is the numbering system, and it's very, very simple. In the center, you have number 1. So the person who's the subject of the family tree is 1. Above that is the father, he's 2. Below the father is number 3. And what you notice if you go through it is all the men's names are even numbers, all the women's names are odd numbers. The number of a father is twice the number of the child. So you see number 2 there, his father is 4, his father is 8, his father is 16, 32, and so on. That's the way it goes. And all the women's numbers are, as I said, odd numbers. And they all converge on the person who's the subject. And that's actually quite flattering in a way, because it looks as if all these people existed just to give birth to you. Because you're there in the center, and all of these are your forebears. And their greatest triumph was your birth, and you are number 1. Now, this is the piece I was talking about. In order to make that particular family tree related to somebody else. Now, my grandfather's name was Jack McCarthy. He had a sister called Claire McCarthy, who married Frank O'Shea. So all I had to do was get the chart, and it's his, the side there on the right that's filled in, is his mother's side. So you have, that quarter is exactly the same as mine. So I was able to hand that over to him without anything that doesn't relate to him. So if you do individual families, you're able to do that. And it makes your work far more useful. Now, if you go to the trouble of writing the history of a particular family, it's nice to think that it's going to have more readers than your brothers and sisters. That your first cousins, your second cousins, and your third cousins will be interested in some of your family trees, provided they're not contaminated by accounts of relations that are not connected to them. In other words, nobody wants a family tree that has all sorts of people in it that have nothing to do with them. So you can tailor-make a family tree quite easily if you have each building block or each family as a separate unit. So that's why I'm emphasizing that. Now, this is another thing, there are various applications for doing family trees. Family Tree Maker and so on, and there are different kinds of apps you can get. Now, I found by just experimentation that you can do a family tree by simply using Microsoft Word. Now, the symbols there at the top of the page, you see those. Now, they're all separate keystrokes in Microsoft Word. And if you look at the kind of broken horizontal line below that, you can make it like that. And then if you look at the family tree, underneath that, you have Jack Murphy, Helen Sullivan, and then you have Jane, Joseph, Mary, William, Eileen, and Ciara. Now, they are made by simply removing the spaces between the symbols. And you can make very complicated family trees that way. And they're tailor-made for your family tree because you put them together yourself. And as I said, you don't need any app for that. You just need Microsoft Word. Now, I might be able to show you that in a bit more detail in a minute. Now, that's another family tree where I was showing the descent of my Kerry ancestors and the connection that they had with one another. Now, you see at the very top, you have Ancestor McCarthy. We don't know what his name is. Now, he came from Bantry to Lixnaw in Kerry in 1775. Or no, he didn't come. His two sons came, Peter McCarthy and John McCarthy. And Peter McCarthy's descendants then would be a son called John, a grandson called Liam Rua, John's grandson called Jack Liam. There was a grandson, another descendant called Jack McCarthy, and then there was John. And the John McCarthy over on the right had two sons. Well, he had actually 6 sons, but I was only interested in showing a relationship between these two because they remained in the farm in Kerry. He had the son called William, a son called Charles, and so on. You can see the descent there. Now, it would be very difficult to get an app to do a family tree like that for you. Using the symbols that are available in Microsoft Word, you can do it without any bother. And you can do even more complicated families. Now, if you look at the bottom one there, I'm going to show a particular relationship there. 2 members of the extended family, one from each of the brothers, got married. And this is showing how they were connected. Now you see over there on the left, you had John, who was the father. He had two sons, Charles and William. Charles' son was William Charles, his son was Charles, and he had a daughter called Mary. William had a son called Bedine, a grandson Patrick, a great-grandson Patrick, and a great-great-grandson Moss. And the two of those got married, and that's to show the connection. And so their son was Muirlish, and he has a son, Cottle. And you can see how many generations his ancestry goes back. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations. But kind of bespoke family trees like that are difficult to do unless you do them yourself with Microsoft Word. Now this is just an example of why so many families get cut out. Now you have the blue on top, and they are the male side, my father's side, and you have the pink one underneath, and they're the mother's side. Now you see the arrows are of different lengths, and the arrows show when a name kind of became extinct and wasn't used anymore. And you see on the outer circle, all of the names are gradually erased until you just get two, a long pink and a long blue over there. The longest blue is just in the center of the circle there, and the pink one underneath it. So the pink one is my wife's one, and children in the middle are the people in the middle are my children, and the blue one is the McCarthy one, my father's one. So you have, we're running down through 7 generations, and the outer ring you have 64 surnames, and in the innermost one you have 1. It's reduced to 1. Now it doesn't mean that the importance of the other ancestors got progressively less important. It's just a social convention that people keep their father's name, and that's passed down, and all the other names are wiped out. I think that affects the genealogy of females more than anybody else, because you just see the progressive erasure of the female ancestry there. So I think, you know, women in particular should certainly concentrate on their mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers. It's much harder to do it because the evidence isn't there. But, you know, it's not nice to think that they're just gone and irretrievably lost. Now, I just finish up. What time is it there? Okay, look. I just spend a few more minutes because I want to show you something else related to what I was saying there. Now, there we have it. So, now that's what I was talking about earlier on, and this is Microsoft Word. So just to show you what I have in mind there. Now, if you look at this, this shows how it's put together. Now, you can see that they're all made up of individual little bits and pieces. And you can move all these by doing that, or you know, putting them going in the opposite direction. And you can, like, you see that this particular thing in the center is just made up of those symbols. And what you can do to widen that line is you just highlight something, go to copy, and then put your cursor there, and so you can make it as long as you like, and you can copy and paste those wherever you want. And no, it takes a while, and you have to be fiddling around with it for a bit, but you can come up with, as I said, bespoke family trees, genealogies, to explain any little point that you might have. Now, you won't be able to do that with any of the applications that they have, because they're too clunky. They have a predetermined capacity to do certain things, and they won't be able to do anything else other than that. No, and if you make a mistake there, all you have to do is you kind of click go back, and obviously you have to save it regularly and so on, and it'll take you a bit of time. Now, just before I finish up then,
can you show us the symbols again, please, where you found them?
Oh, the symbols are in any of the applications in Microsoft Word.
Yeah, like underscore is one.
Yeah, underscore and hyphen and all those things. And once you find them, basically what you do is you make a palette like that of them, so that you can pick and choose and build. They're your kind of Lego blocks there, and you can reproduce them, create as many of those as you want. Now, just very quickly then, I'll just show you a little bit of family tree, because I need to do this to. Oh, you don't say it, yeah, your family tree is ruined. No. I was going to show you a few more family trees, but look, I'd have to leave it at this. Now, this is the family tree of my grandfather. Now, they lived in 11 Maymount Friars Walk, Cork. So this is number 4. There's 3 other pieces before that. The one is the earliest one. So that's a picture of him with his youngest grandchild. That is the badge of the Royal Irish Constabulary. Now, as I said, I knew very little about him, and I got a parallel career, and I was able to do that. And then I just looked at how he would have been fixed during 1916, the War of Independence, and afterwards. Now, all of those events that were going on impacted on him and his family hugely. Now, during his lifetime, or during, we'll say, his period in the Royal Irish Constabulary, he was living in Cork, where 100 RIC men were shot and killed. Going to Mass, coming to Mass, at home, off duty, on duty, day and night. Now, obviously, his children would have been affected by this, and it was interesting to kind of maybe look into that to a certain extent. And now, the interesting thing was that in the end of the day, he got a very good pension. He wasn't allowed into the guards, but a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people would say, well, the RIC got pensions from the British government afterwards. Now, the RIC got pensions from the Free State government and De Valera's government afterwards. And it was insisted in the treaty, it was an article of the treaty, that the civil servants and the RIC, not the Black and Tans and not the auxiliaries, they were omitted, they were not to get anything. But it was recognised that the RIC were basically policemen. They were caught up in this thing. It was kind of, beyond their control, and they just muddled on as best they can. and they got their pension at the end of the day, where they didn't get a job in the police. Now, I needed to point that out, and now, for taking part in a Guard of Honour for Queen Victoria, they all got that particular medal. Now, that's a picture from there again. But I just read out this thing and I'll finish then. So, my grandfather, and of course my grandmother, and there's a separate section on my grandmother. Now, this is just about him, so you'd write separately about your grandmother. He had 209 descendants. That kind of finished it off pretty well. Now, anybody in the future can tap into that and they'll find all that information. And as I said, it isn't kind of contaminated by material that has nothing to do with him or his family. No, you just. Well, look, I better not ask questions because we have another speaker, and I'll finish up there. So thanks for your attention.